Welcome to Metaphysical Life Support, a place to learn about the subtle and profound effects of metaphysics in our life. This show is about exploration tools and the people who live in awareness, supporting and inspiring us all to live with and from our source, empowering us to manifest consciously and encouraging us to have a sense of compassion and humor about being human. Our guest today is Rosie Potestio. Rosie is a spiritual director and one of my longest friends, and I am absolutely delighted she's here in town visiting, and we've basically been talking since Tuesday, and we are going to have a great time talking about a wide variety of topics with her today. Welcome, Rosie.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited about being here.
I am over the moon sharing and talking about spiritual and metaphysical topics with you.
Yes.
So, in your infinite wisdom, when I said, where would you like to start? You said, well, let's start at the beginning. So, we both have a lot of gifts and talents, and why don't you start by telling us a little bit about where you came from and your gifts and talents and how you learned about them?
I came from a family where my mother was very intuitive and very well educated and had an open mind and loved to explore things. My father, on the other hand, was kind of old school. And so when my mother would make this wonderful intuitive statement, my father would say, well, how do you know that? So I learned very early that it's good to be intuitive, but you just can't speak of it. But it gave me a grounding because I was very close to my mother. It gave me a grounding in being intuitive and exploring those gifts, even though I didn't speak of them. And the few times I learned to speak of them, I was compelled to speak of them. People would be frightened of the information that I intuitively had put forth. And so here again, I learned to be quiet.
So I wanted to share because I also learned to be, that people were afraid. I had gifts like you. I did not grow up in a family where we talked about gifts or we could even have that closeness to understand. For me, it was an experience of, I was about 12 and I was working and I went in. I was working as a dishwasher. This is back in the day. And the cook, she was about 30. Her and I had a certain amount of friendship and a really sort of nice relationship. Well, in our house, it was normal to beat the children, which is kind of dated because that wasn't abnormal when we were growing up. But you never touch the mother. That was the rule. And so this was a grown woman. And she was sitting at the back table, clearly upset, and I went over and I touched her hand, and the minute I got close to her, and especially when I touched her hand, I immediately knew what was happening. And it was interesting because I could see her, and I could see the man she was with, and I could see exactly what he was doing. And I looked at her and I said, well, you're a grown woman. You have your own money. You have to tell him to stop or he needs to leave. And her face went completely white. And our relationship was forever changed. And that was the moment when I realized that I was a problem. And I didn't even know that I didn't even know it was gifted.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was anything unusual until that moment. And then being in Catholic school and starting to explore the way people responded and how not normal I was.
Yeah.
But you had a sense of normalcy around it, even though it was hidden.
It was hidden and it was unspoken, but there was still that normality because Mom and I would talk about it when no one else was around. Just kind of, oh, what do you feel? What are you feeling? And that was all right in that environment. And that was how I lived my life until I was in my 20s and I moved to Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz was really on the cutting edge of the metaphysical breakthroughs at that point.
I want a little backstory for the audience.
Sure.
you were raised in an open-minded or a liberal Christian home, but you also had a Catholic grandma who you were very
Yeah.
close to.
Yeah. So, yes, a liberal, open-minded Christian home, especially through my mother. My mother was a Bible scholar, but she also was a scholar of metaphysical books and history books and reading books and you name it. So she had a very open mind. So I learned very, very early that I was a Christian, and I still am. I am a Christian. But I acknowledge that there are many, many paths to God. Many.
So that brings us to your Buddhist experience.
So, well, actually, before that, I'm walking down the street of Santa Cruz, downtown, and this gentleman came up to me who I'd never known. Now, you have to remember that I am an introvert.
And you were also raised on a ranch.
Yes. So this man comes right in front of me, and he stops, and I'm looking everywhere but at him. And he says to me, he looks me square in the eye, and he says, "We're having a channeling meeting tonight, and we'd like you to come." Well, first I was wondering who he was talking to. And then I really focused in on him and kind of went into that intuitional mode and said, yes, absolutely. And this was a group of people who started me on this metaphysical path of channeling information and exploring what it meant to have past lives, what those looked like.
For the audience, we talk about a lot of different things. I think most people understand that intuitive is being knowing without knowing how you know. And being empathetic means feeling what other people feel. I'm not sure that everybody understands what channeling means.
Channeling is setting aside your own words for the words of another being. Someone who you realize is very wise, and so you consciously allow them to speak through you.
So an example would be Edgar Cayce.
Yes.
And for the audience, Edgar Cayce, was he around the turn of the century?
Mm-hmm.
He was a regular person who started channeling health information and a wide variety of information that proved to work.
That is still used today.
That is still used today. And
Yeah.
a lot of the alternative medicine that we're using is based in some of the things that he taught us.
Yeah.
So channeling is essentially allowing your voice to be used by a higher
Right.
calling or a higher being, and as you said, putting yourself aside. It's an interesting idea, channeling, and we might make a whole segment on that another time. So please go ahead. You were channeling and learning about...
So there was a couple of individuals who did the channeling, and I really enjoyed the group, and I really enjoyed exploring what does it mean, reincarnation, and did we have prior lives? And it just resonated. Something in me, well, of course. Otherwise, nothing seems fair. So I also, at that point, was a part of a group that we started studying Taoism first, and Buddhism. Here, again, just nourishing this belief that there are many paths to God. We ended up actually starting a Taoist monastery in Santa Cruz, which was a very, very wonderful experience.
Taoism is something that we're less familiar with here. So a little bit about Taoism.
Taoism is not a religion. It's a philosophy, and it's based so much on nature and flowing with nature, being receptive to nature.
So considering one of your archetypes is the nature child,
Gee,
that really clicked for you.
you think?
So we have about 2 minutes to go over this idea of how do you reconcile being Christian and taking parts of Buddhism and having this Taoist experience come in. Some people would say that this conflicted. And what was your experience?
my experience, it was just something I hadn't learned yet. Oh, look at this aspect. Look at this aspect. It's all aspects of God. And I was so excited to start learning all of these other aspects of God, other ways to communicate with God, to feel a part of God's realm. And it was very exciting. There was no reconciliation. There was, well, this is wrong and this is right and this is, it was just, whoa, look at that. This is so exciting.
So even with your deep biblical scholarly background, when you encountered these other experiences, they were natural or
They
intuitive
support
somehow?
one another. If you really look into them, they all support one another.
Well, Buddha says love and Jesus says love, so they kind of work together. I want to point out as we kind of wrap up this segment, by the way, we're going to have a number of other segments, so stay tuned. We use the masculine word God, but you're also wearing the colors of the goddess, and you're wearing the colors of the goddess from Mary to Isis to all the colors of the goddess.
Yeah.
And so for those people in the audience who that matters a lot to, I want to point out that using the word God, when you're raised in a Christian home, and God means what is divine, what is the creator, does not exclude
Right.
the goddess in the way that at least Rosie and I are looking at it.
Yeah, it's inclusive. It means, to me, it means everything. It means the divine, it means nature, it means all of that. You know, the soul, it's inclusive.
So we're going to come back and we're going to pick up a little bit on the next phase of your journey, which is about healing and I think touch on forgiveness.
Excellent.
And so I would like to thank you, Rosie, for joining us today and ask you, the audience, to remember to like, comment, and share so we can bring you more awesome people and metaphysical ideas for living well. I'm Naomi Eklund, and I want to thank you. You're our audience for joining us on Metaphysical Life Support. Our purpose is to provide thoughtful and practical ways to explore the metaphysical reality of your life, to see where life starts and our most powerful journey toward manifesting the strength of our soul on this earth.